Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast Boost Production Line Transparency with Device Management. And I trust, we all on the same page when it comes to today's manufacturing. Every second counts, right? So having an effective asset management is critical to preventing downtime, to manage your risk and ensure seamless operations. Because, as I said, we all know that a single failure in your OT environment can disrupt the entire system and leading you to some costly delays. And we will see some examples where exactly that happened. So, implementing a state of the art management solution is essential for keeping production lean and efficient. Welcome our special guest today, Florian Jurgens. He's the CISO at Forwork, and Dr. Jonas Kalb, the Director of our Product and Commercial Strategy. And together we will be discussing the key topics, navigating a heterogeneous OT landscape, and I will elaborate a little bit on that in a second. Interacting or integrating old devices into an OT security protocol. So the question here is, are we going to replace or retrofit? And we're going to discuss the key pillars of a very strong OT cybersecurity protocol. And last but not least, we will elaborate on the question, is asset inventory a must, or can already a solid backup strategy alone secure your shop flow? These and many, many other questions will be answered in our expert panel today. My name is Georgios Theodoridis. You see me on the very right-hand side, and I will moderate and guide you through today's presentation. Some organizationals, this webcast will be recorded and it will be shared afterwards. So for those people who will not be able to attending this meeting or want to share and refer to a further stage, no worries. All the sensitive information in the recording will obviously not be visible, email addresses, company names. For the sake of bandwidth, we have put you all on mute and we have turned off your cameras. Please apologize on that. But again, we want to ensure that you will get best quality possible for a presentation today. Yet we want to have, an interaction with you. So please use the Q&A section in Microsoft Teams to raise your questions. There is some room after the webcast where we can cover all your open topics. All right. With that being said, let's start with the status quo, as I would say, because one of the things we see in automated production is that they're going under drastic changes, right? And three topics that we see across our customer base, but also reflected from typical market trends, and this is regardless of the industries, is number one, change management, because change management becomes the top workforce related challenge in industrial organizations. And number two is the OT device landscape, because we see it is increasingly diverse and complex. And these first two topics are very interrelated because you can imagine as complexity continues to increase, change management becomes more difficult and adoption of new technologies becomes more challenging. So ultimately, at some point, organizations may lose their competitive advantages. So they might seem very simple on the surface, but these topics have far reaching implications. Now, the internal challenges created from change management and OT complexity can alone be overwhelming, but you still must think about threats from the outside, which brings us to topic number three, and that is the cybersecurity part. See, 70% of industrial firms experienced a cyber attack in 2023. 70%, that is a crazy high number. And guess what? This percentage has increased every year for the last decade. And unfortunately, we don't see any sign of declining. So this is something we definitely need to be prepared for. And on the following slide, I will show you examples where gaps in that production resilience resulted in significant losses, both financially and for the brands overall. So on that slide, we see three companies, Colgate, Palmolive, Clorox, and Snapchill, all well-respected global brands, no doubt on that. And Colgate, Palmolive, and Snapchill disruption resulted from internal threats, which in both cases were caused by relatively minor changes to their production processes that went undetected and caused a huge damage, as you see. There's a three-digit value million damage that they have caused. The Clorox disruption, on the other hand, was the result of an external threat. So they had a complete production shutdown, worst case scenario. Also, you see the estimated damage, three-digit million value. And these are just three examples that were very visible in media. But for every high profile event like these three, there are countless others that occur on a smaller but still very impactful scale. Now, what we have learned also is that assets, considering the asset management overall, is not only hardware or software. There are processes included and there are people included. And I would like to open up the discussion and ask, Jonas and Florian on, exactly those topics, that the asset management, thinking of hardware, software, processes, and people, but also facing the challenges in change management and OT complexity. So maybe we can start with Jonas. Jonas, what are your thoughts and what is your perception on those critical topics we see out of our customer base?
Thank you so much, Yorgo. I think you're raising a couple of really good points here, and I sort of want to iterate a couple of the key messages and then sort of speak about what we see in the market quite a lot. So first of all, it really is something that we want everybody to take away by the end of this is I can only manage what I can see, and that is a super central topic for production overall, especially in current times, I would feel. And what I want to highlight is that we always love to focus on cyber attacks, but what I really like is that you also showed a couple of examples here where really the key issue wasn't a cyber attack, but more the operational burdens of managing the shop floor, because they are at least equally important right now, right? It always, and that's something that I absolutely agree with what you said, is it boils down to one key topic, and that is resilience. I'll touch on that a bit later, what it means for us and how we sort of feel or think that we can manage that from all of the discussions that we have. What's important for now is that resilience always relates to both cyber but also to operational governance. So in the end, every company wants to improve uptime and quality in their production, right? Or let's say at least keep it at a very high level. Very few companies where we say, improving is probably not what their key priority is right now. For the past, I would say, year or two, we experienced this sort of theme of resilience in almost every customer contact. In Europe, I think that is mainly down to, or at least partially down to NIS2. The NIS2 directive will become in effect in national legislation from October onwards, but it's not a purely European phenomenon. We see the same drivers in the United States, where resilience is a big topic. The United Kingdom, where we see it again and again. In Asia, we see it a lot in Australia and New Zealand right now, and it always is sort of a desire for improved resilience, which, if we really think about it, drives the direct need for transparency. So any company in the space must be in a position to sort of proactively manage all of the assets. And you mentioned that, right? It can be hardware, it can be software, it can be processes, it can be employees. For us in automated production, obviously, it boils down to a couple of simple questions that are simple to ask. So what automation devices do I have? What PLCs are in use? What firmwares are on there? How many known vulnerabilities are in the environment? Which one should I fix? Which one do I not need to fix? What configurations are currently on my automation devices? So, what's the most recent automation project? What changes were made to that? Is the change that was made to it one that I want or one that I really do not want? And interestingly, even though we see European regulation as one of the main drivers for that, it also really happens everywhere in the world, right? Europeans are very quick with regulation and sort of on the forefront of regulation a lot, but we see those regulations trickle down through other countries. We have certifications that are very important, right? ISO 27001. We have NIST in the United States that, currently doesn't have that strong of a regulatory impact, but over time has started to at least articulate more of a desire to also be, a more strictly regulatory body. We have SOCI in Australia, Singapore and Malaysia have issued a number of policies around cybersecurity, where Singapore really takes sort of one of the most important positions in the area. But what we always need to keep in mind is that no matter how much we talk about regulation is always, in business, when somebody speaks about regulation, is always a bit negative. A lot of the things that we see right now, especially those that drive transparency and proactive management, they just make sense from a business perspective. Like, really, it's all about being able to react to something that shouldn't happen and the ability to steer your business into the right direction. At the same time, and I don't want to talk too long, but at the same time, we do need to be very realistic about the current status quo. In the real world, we really observe that the majority of companies are far behind sort of where we want to be, right? Even answers to these questions: what assets do I have? How are changes controlled? Who owns an asset? Who owns patching? Who drives post-incident processes? We see that many companies are able to provide answers that look good on a spreadsheet or in a presentation, sort of on what I would call an academic level. But once you drill deeper and you try and see how the actual operational execution is, and you start sort of challenging a couple of things, you really see the big challenges that companies face. You see shared ownerships for assets or no ownership for some assets. You see processes that are really non-practical in reality, like your asset list being updated in Excel, or somebody running around with USB sticks and stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I really look forward, and it's a huge pleasure for me to be here today and discuss these topics, and I really look forward to Florian's insights as well.
Thank you very much. That is a good transition, Florian. I would kindly ask you, exactly your statements and your point of view on that topics.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, let me give me the possibility to introduce myself. Yeah, my name is Florian Jürgens. I'm currently working the CISO for the direct selling company Vorwerk. We are a producer of household appliances, and of course, we have a huge OT environment, big production site in different countries, and yeah, asset management or risk management is always a huge challenge for us. Like Jonas already said, you can only protect what you really know. And due to the fact that there are more and more upcoming regulatory requirements, which are, of course, also relevant for us, like the NIS2, the Cyber Resilience Act, the DORA, we are facing more and more the challenge to have an overview about our IT assets, but of course our OT assets. And we realized, especially in our team, that when it comes to the OT security knowledge, we actually have some kind of gap because it's similar to the native information security knowledge, but there's also a huge difference between that.
Thank you very much. So being in the flow of exchange, I would like to address a couple of more questions. You touched on that point, and I think it will also be valuable to understand how important is asset management in the context of OT security protocols.
Mhm. So for me, asset management is the absolute foundation of any OT security strategy, because I can only repeat myself, you can only protect what you know. And without a complete inventory of all your devices, machines, server in the production environment, you risk missing security gaps. And therefore, it's not only about the tracking assets, but also to continuously monitoring their maintenance and of course their update needs. We are talking about patches for vulnerable for 0-day exploits and so on and so on, and therefore an transparent and complete asset management improves the overall security level and helps you to be more protective against any kind of cyber attacks.
Thank you very much. In the beginning of the webcast, we saw, an overview of change management and heterogeneous OT landscape. So more devices from more different vendors. Now, thinking of implementing an asset management in such an environment, what is the biggest challenge from your point of view?
Mhm. Actually, the biggest challenge lies in the heterogeneity of these OT systems. The company I've worked before, Lanxess, which is a big special chemical company based in Cologne, um, they also had a big production side. Of course, it's a chemical company, and there were actually machines which are 140 years old, and there is no kind of web interface or something like that. So the mix of old and new devices, this is actually a real challenge because these devices use different kind of, I don't know, communication protocols, have different security requirements, and integrating these new and, of course, these old systems in one unified asset management platform um, is one challenge, but to do it without disrupting the ongoing operations and to keep the business impact as low as possible is another one. Because you cannot go to your business side and say, okay, we want to build up an overall asset management. Please shut down the production for the upcoming 2 weeks. So this is really hard. And beside that, the system must be, yeah, it must be scalable to meet the future needs.
Absolutely. Now we have a much better appreciation on the complexity part. When it comes to costs, right? I mean, how can you optimize the costs, but you don't want to, compromising on security?
Mhm. So for me, automation is the key to reducing the cost. Using IoT-based sensors and AI-driven tools will help you to get an overview, a full overview, but on the other side, to keep the costs low. For example, you can do some kind of inventory tracking, maintenance, monitoring. These are all stuff which will reduce the workload within your team if you can do it with tools on an automatically basis. And of course, cloud-based solution can also help to reduce the hardware and the management costs. So therefore, I would say, yeah, automation, cloud-based tools, the use of AI-driven tools, which are already implemented in a lot of solutions. These are all things which can help you to optimize the cost.
So security requirements, can be very complex. So if I may ask, how do you address those security requirements in your manufacturing, which are coming, from IoT and other connected devices?
Mhm. So the first and the proven method is also to isolate these devices into some kind of separate network segments and develop specific security protocols tailored to them. On the other side, it's essential to regularly check and patch these devices for vulnerabilities. Beside that, of course, encryption, multi-factor authentication should also be used to have some kind of secure access to these devices. And talking about secure access, this is one of our main priority to make sure that we have a secure remote access connection between the vendor to do some kind of maintenance, to do some kind of updating, patching, in our environment. And I think the BSI, the Bundesamt für Sicherheit und Informationstechnik, offers also some kind of top 10 OT security risks, and the remote access to these devices, to these machines, is always the number one because it gives attackers the possibility to have impact on your environment without being locally in the environment itself.
Thank you very much. Now, let's talk a little bit about, the the life systems. In order to get maximum security, let's say, how often, what is your experience? How often should, you audit and update devices in your production environment to make sure that
Mhm.
you have maximum security?
It depends, of course. The inspection intervals should be based on the criticality of the devices. So you first of all you need to prioritize what are actually your critical devices. Highly sensitive systems should ideally be inspected and updated on a monthly basis to ensure security. If these devices are less critical, they can be checked quarterly or semi-annually. Like I said, it totally depends on the criticality. So you have to talk with your business. In addition to that, yeah, real-time monitoring systems are always a good recommendation to detect and respond to yeah, potential threats, to ongoing attacks or failures. So you have much more time to act if you detect these things on a very early stage.
Thank you very much. Let's cover the last question. Let's say, or yeah, it's basically I would like to address what is best practice in order to keeping up all those tracks, all your assets within your large enterprise.
Mhm. So, from an organizational perspective, regular audits, pen tests, and of course, inventory reviews are essential. Um, it's good to have an asset management, but you need to make sure that this asset management is always up to date. Beside that, I would say clear responsibilities within the team, so that you have a fixed point of contact. From a technical perspective, I would say a centralized platform that provides, I don't know, real-time monitoring of all the assets is absolutely crucial. So you have some kind of digital dashboard where you can see the status and location of all your devices, machines, servers, because this will increase the transparency a lot. So these are the 2 to 3 things I would say are some kind of best practices.
Thank you for everything you have shared, Florian. It was very nice to have you here in the talk. I think we all have a much better appreciation at the moment, and I think it's the perfect timing to transition to Jonas' Kahl presentation. Jonas, may I ask you, to take over and share what you have prepared for us?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Yorgo. So I would like to sort of start with a bit of a wider view again before we, of course, transition a little bit into discussing what are potential solutions and what can people do about this. We've discussed a lot of the problems and we said, hey, things need to be done, but the question is how can people actually do that and why do we feel certain things need to be done? So what I want to highlight again, I mean, this the webcast about transparency, and we discussed transparency a lot, and we also discussed, the need to see what you can manage and all of that. And I just want to highlight one thing again. So for us, transparency is not a self-fulfilling business blessing, right? It needs to cater to some real business outcomes, and transparency must be, in that sense, a means to an end. And the question of what this end is, what is this business outcome that we see is resilience. So really, no matter who we talk to, resilience always comes up in some form or the other. It is just worded differently. So what it is for everybody in their individual position, no matter what sort of level in the sort of business hierarchy they are, it always is the ability to react to unforeseen events, to prevent harm done to the organization or the production. It just really sounds different depending on what stakeholder you talk to. Everybody of these people, however, has a direct interest in having a resilient business and a resilient production. So if we discuss this with, the management, CEOs, VPs, this IT, OT security managers, sort of the real sort of higher level management, then the topics that come up when we speak about production overall it's the ROI. It's how future-proof is my organization? How good can I drive digital transformation to ensure that I can be a leader in my segment in 10 years still? How easy is it for my organization to abide to regulation that is here now, but also how easy can I adjust to regulation that comes up over time without having to run 50 more projects? On the more operational levels, the engineers, maintenance, depending on company size, plant managers, either sort of upper management or more on the operational side, is really it's all about keeping the show running. You need to somehow deal with all of the problems that we read daily in newspapers, right? We have with people who need to deal with skilled labor shortage. We have to deal with people who, because of skilled labor shortage, either have 5 less colleagues than they had last year in the same shift, or they have untrained colleagues who need to be upskilled very quickly and need easy systems to work with. On top of that, we have the inherent complexity of a shop floor where you have a heterogeneous environment, different types of softwares, PLCs, vendors, processes. That can be difficult to manage on a good day, and then on a bad day, obviously, things escalate quickly. For everybody on this list, really, the key question remains: how do I keep my production uptime high and my quality also high? That's the real big questions that we're faced with every day. And when I think about that, or when we discuss this on a more sort of strategic level with customers, with prospects, really what it boils down to is a level of maturity, governance maturity on the shop floor, if you call it like that we need to drive, and we need to drive together in a joint process with customers, right? It's about the ability to, on the one hand, define what should happen at every stage of the process, then track, is what I defined really what is happening, or are there deviations from it? And in the event of deviations, be able to define some countermeasures. That sounds simple and easy on a super high level. Let's put it like one level further down, which then still sounds nice and easy, and then we look into reality. So on a first level, if we translate what I said into a model of governance maturity, we can leverage a very simple business model that is, as you will recognize, probably found in every business textbook. And the start is always technology, right? So we need to introduce some degree of technology with which we can visualize and show what do we have. So what automation projects do I have? What assets, what automation devices do I even have? And that can range from the sort of lowest level of maturity. So I have a handwritten list, or I have an Excel that I update regularly, to the highest level that I have something that I can see on the click of a button that's in a digitalized format and really an accessible, centralized digital format. Same for backups, right? I can have USB sticks, I can have central storages, I can have a system with which I can create automated backups for all of my automation projects. The next step is then, when I have the technology to use, I need to define what is the process to use that. So I need to say, dear maintenance manager, please create a backup with this USB stick once a year. That is, in theory, a process. In reality, it's a quite bad process because the technology is poor. The process is very rare. So I sort of have an environment in which I'm probably more on the lower level of maturity. And on the highest level of maturity, I can say, hey, there's this tool that you can use. Please ensure that all of your automated backups are created. Please ensure that you look at the asset management lists that and that often, so that you know what the inventory is. You can check the life cycle and so on. That's more on the more mature side of things. When I have technology and processes, some people would think they're done, but everybody who's ever tried to work with actual people realizes that just putting process and technology out there doesn't mean that people actually follow it. So you need to train people to use these processes and to use the technology. Then you need to monitor if they're actually doing it. And if you do that, you're starting to be in a really beautiful world, because then when we sort of driven that to a level of maturity that is actually, has constant monitoring, that has defined processes that are easy to follow and as automated as possible with as little manual overhead as possible, when you have technology that is actually state of the art, then you create data points. And these data points come from repeatable, measurable actions that are then put into a centralized storage for data. And if you have that, then you're really at the point where you can use that data, you can correlate it with certain things, you can start thinking about digital transformation, you can start thinking about, may I use an AI-enabled dashboard? Is predictive maintenance something that I want? All of these topics that are, for lack of a better word, sexy right now in automated production, they all require that your maturity levels across technology, processes, people, data are at a minimum level. But, and that's also the reality of the market that we're in, and the daily struggle of managers. This sounds very well, but the reality is this is what we see. Right? We are far behind the levels where we want to be across the market, really, to really be at a highly mature level, right? We see, the reality is, we see backups of automation devices are done on USB files. There is people cycling through production halls and using maybe the yellow USB stick for everything that's a bit further in the beginning of the factory, and the green one for everything that's further in the back, or they have different colors for different production lines, or maybe they don't have anything. In some cases, the next maturity level would be to at least write on the USB stick what the backup is for, but in the end, it's still a USB stick. Then we have shared drives or decentralized storage places for a lot of the things that we would have, either again for backups or for asset lists. For asset lists, what we see a lot is Excel, right? The on the one hand, biggest driver for getting things done, and at the same time, probably one of the biggest hinderers for digital transformation, really, because it's such a great tool for everything, but it never is as good as a real tool. Is that people just have their asset lists in Excel, and they think that that's a good idea to just update it manually every 2 months. Which then leads to, it says phone joker here, it should be phone a friend. It's sort of this is actually a poor German translation, sorry, that slipped through when we translated this. It's phone a friend, the situation where that everybody's been in, where you're looking for a backup, where you're looking for the asset list, and you need to call Carl, who's currently on holidays and who can't pick up the phone. And until he doesn't answer the phone, we have no idea where the actual asset lists are or where the backup is. And that is, to be honest, where the real problem lies, that the status quo is the absolute opposite of transparency. And how do I expect that with such a manual overhead, I can get to a situation where I can react to negative outcomes that are unforeseen if I don't even know what I currently have? And to really think that this is something that I can manage a shop floor with is a little bit relying that you're the one company in the world that manages to hire all the top 1% or top 1% of the skill pyramid, right? The few employees that are in any business that really proactively manage crisis situations, that are really good at doing everything, that always know what to do. But we don't see that skilled labor shortage, right? So for everybody else, what we really need to say is having a backup is not enough if you don't know where that backup is. And an asset list can only be as good as its accessibility and content. So if you can access it, if you can update it automatically, and if there's good content in there, then it's good. Otherwise, it's not. And I don't want to go too deep into this, but obviously this is sort of one of the key drivers for how we set up Octoplant, right? So we use Octoplant, or you can use Octoplant to create automated backups. So to automate a previously manual task of creating backup of all your automation assets. so that you have all the automation projects in a centralized location, versioned with change history, all of that is there. You can even have customized activity alerting or change alerts, and the change alerts would actually give you something like the current status of that is running on the machine is different than what you wanted to have run on the machine, so that you can then have either targeted recovery or say, oh, well, actually that change was quite good. That's what I want. You can have global status overviews about all of your sites. You can see which sites follow the process, which sites do not follow the process. You can have a view into your current recovery status. What if something goes wrong today? Do I have up-to-date backups that I can recover, or do I not have that? And based on all of that, based on the automation projects that we govern in Octoplant, we can create asset inventories because we directly pass the automation projects and read from there the information about assets, MLFB numbers for Siemens, order numbers, vendors, types, the exact model specification, the firmware. And because it comes directly from the automation project, the granularity of that data is incredibly deep. And with that granular, very detailed data that we can get from the automation projects, we can then also create a CVE mapping so that we can have an actual active vulnerability management on top of that. But again, also something that I really want to highlight is we or our customers don't do that, just for the fun of having yet another system, but they do it because we have a measurable, direct, and very high return on investment. That's because, on the one hand, by having manual processes automated, there's a direct savings in dollars from the workload that you save. On the other hand, you're saving downtime. We do customer surveys on an at least yearly basis, and the latest results show that depending on industry, so vertical that you're from, we save customers anywhere between sort of 10 and 16, 17 hours of downtime every year. And the automotive companies, for example, are rather on the larger end. And if you think sort of automotive together with mining companies, they are really up there where downtime is expensive, right? Where an hour easily costs more than $1 million an hour. An hour of downtime easily costs more than $1 million, sorry. Secondly, we help companies drive digital transformation. I already mentioned that, right? Repeatable processes leads to data. Data leads to value because you can actually start correlating that data, and you can actually drive all of these transformation digital projects that you wanted to drive before, but that you didn't have the data for. And then last but not least, regulatory topics. We are working with lawyers, for example, recently for the NIS2 directive, where we're directly working to ensure that what we deliver can have a significant impact in any NIS2 strategy. And the actual results from sort of our working with these lawyers, specialized NIS2 lawyers in the past, and there's a legal position paper on that as well, by the way, that with the functionalities that Octoplant provide, any NIS2 strategy that basically doesn't work with us may struggle, because the functionalities that we provide, help in asset management, they help in post-recovery processes, all of these things. So we have a significant value add in anything that is to do with NIS2, and because all of these other regulations have a trickle-through effect, obviously also with the rest of the regulations in place. That's where I would end today. Of course, always happy to discuss further with anybody who's interested, and I'll give the hand back to Jorgo. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for all the information, Florian and Jonas. I trust that it was an extremely fruitful discussion, and that everyone here has now a much better appreciation, of the current situation, challenges in automated production, and what could be a recommended course of actions to overcome all those challenges. So really appreciate that. With that being said, I would like to open up the Q&A section in order to cover, some of the questions we have received there. There is a very easy question. I think I can answer that. So the question is, will the slide deck be available after the meeting? Yes, it will. I don't know, you might have missed in the introduction. not only the slide deck will be available, but also the recorded session will be part of that. So we are going to follow up and give you all that information needed. Second question was, okay. So I think this is touching a little bit on the overview where you had, phone a friend, USB sticks approach, Jonas, on your slide. So the question goes kind of this direction. Because you were talking about this as a common thing we see across our customer base and in the market. So I think the question is touching, is that relevant only for small, or is it also a very common process in large companies? What are your experience on that?
So sorry, I'm laughing. It's one of these questions that I think it's one of the typical questions that we see when we come to customers, and it's one of these questions that after a meeting when you go to the coffee machine together, sort of quietly ask you sort of is what you see here as bad as with others? That's sort of the question that's behind this a lot, and I can honestly say that we have about 3,000 customers. We work with the largest corporations in the world. We also work with a couple of really, really small corporations and companies. We don't see a significant difference in maturity that is driven by size, really. We have the largest corporations, some of the largest corporations where still USB sticks are used. We have some of the very small ones who are incredibly digitized, who really follow sort of all the best practices. On the one hand, maybe because it's easier to implement in a small environment and you just need one person who really drives this. On the other hand, though, there's also for a lot of small companies a bit of a struggle for resources, and this really making people understand that this can be a problem on a higher level where budgets are there, also sometimes more difficult in smaller organizations. So, and you have some large organizations where really the organization itself is very much interested in being on the forefront of everything they work with. We have a couple of amazing customers who always drive really the next level and who also together with us help to really improve what we're already doing. So long story short, we cannot see a difference. There's large organizations who are very good and who are very immature, and we have small organizations who are very, very sort of on the forefront, and some of them who are very immature. Yeah, that's very long, very much talking for a very short answer.
No, thank you very much. I mean, this is exactly the point in having that discussion and having this also, broader understanding of different perspectives. I think we have time for one more question, and then, for the sake of time, I would end the session. That doesn't mean that we're not willing to answer more questions. So don't worry, if there are unanswered questions, we will make sure we're going to follow up and give you a proper answer on that. So last question for now. Thinking, of, the impact if not a software or not a system, if there is no system in place, what does that specifically mean for all the various roles we saw earlier on? Like, thinking of the C-levels, thinking of the operations team, thinking of OT, IT security managers, plant managers, but also, engineers and maintenance people. So what does it mean if there is no system like a central platform in place?
I don't want to be too negative in this, but obviously, my first answer is I think your third slide or fourth slide or whatever it was shows what happens then, right? You have something that goes terribly wrong, and you have no way of reacting to that. That's sort of the worst case scenario that we see in the world, and that we discuss then with a lot of companies after. The sort of slightly, or not slightly, let's go to the other spectrum and say, let's say nothing goes terribly wrong. What are sort of your day-to-day effects? And the day-to-day effects are really, you have a ton of capacity tied on work that really shouldn't be done manually. You have a lot of human errors in there, so that you have, let's say, unspecific information, or you have certain things not there. And I don't want to go to like the poor thing, but it's mainly a capacity and overhead topic that you have, and an unsteerability of the business. So for regulatory, for regulated industries, you have your key issues that we all know about. I mean, think of pharma trying to prove that you do not have changes in your production environment when you cannot show what's in your production environment. Is a bit of a difficult task, right? But it doesn't have to be that drastic. It can also be, NIST 2, NIST, whatever you want, where we actually see theoretical, not just theoretically, we see actually fines levied on companies. So I would say if we don't think of the worst case scenarios, we still have a ton of capacity that really is tied to manual tasks where they have no point in being tied to. We see a ton of human errors in sort of transporting messages, and we see an issue with regulatory sort of organizations and the effects that then trickle out from there.
What a great closing line. I would like to thank everyone who was attending this meeting. Again, thank you, Florian and Jonas, for all your contributions. And I'm really looking forward to keep that discussion up and following up on everybody else production resilience within here this call. Thank you and have a great rest of the day.
You too.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.